So welcome everyone to another one of our Sunday talks. Lovely to see you here. Do provide your feedback on how you're finding these Sunday talks. They are varied from all of our teachers who have supported us in the past. We're very grateful for the time and the effort that these teachers give to us and give to the festival. And they're doing it, they're donating their time freely. And they know that we're using the opportunity to raise some funds through donation from the kind souls that attend. So if you feel that you can donate, we're very happy to receive your donation. Thank you for coming in on a Sunday afternoon, possibly the last sunny day before we get locked down into winter, but it's nice. And we have Swami Svatmananda coming all the way from Norway for today's talk. Now, many of you may not know, but Swamiji has been an ardent supporter of the festival and indeed the underlying charity for very many years. In fact, right at the beginning. So, and it is, in fact, some of you may not even know that he's actually one of the trustees of the charity itself. That's how close he is to us, and we have followed his advice right from the beginning on how to make this more and more successful as years come on. And he's personally come in to give classes and to generally give support to us. So we're very grateful for that. We're very grateful for his knowledge. Sonali and I were in the privileged position of being in Rishikesh when Swamiji was actually became a sannyasi. So we knew him before he went orange, and it was a great moment, shaven head and everything, and it was really a touching moment that we saw him at that time. So very pleased to welcome him back. He's always had a real strong interest in astrology, and he will no doubt tell you a little bit about how he got into that and why he finds it so very, very interesting. And now, together with his Vedic knowledge that he received from the lineage, it's a powerful combination of information. So I'll hand you over and welcome Swamiji. Thank you very much indeed for your support. We always appreciate it. And welcome to this talk.
Thank you very much, Ram. I've always appreciated how kind you and Sonali have been to me every time I come to England, and you guys have been incredible hosts, even including during the yoga festival, which we unfortunately missed this year. So we're definitely looking to reconvene again next year. I think it's in July. June, July, I think, yeah.
Yes, the last weekend in July.
Yeah, okay, great. So I have been doing these talks on Corona and astrology since April, I think. And I've done a number of talks, and I see a few of you guys who are attending today. And you've heard this before, but every time, there's a little different spin, because every time I do these talks, I adjust the information accordingly. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to jump right in. And if there's other things that I need to fill in along the way, I'll do that based on your questions. I'll see if I can share the screen here, and let me know if you can see my screen. Oh, see a lot of people. And there we go. Okay, so welcome to the talk, and before I continue, I do make a disclaimer. Since we're in a litigious society nowadays, these things are relatively important. And since we're dealing with English speakers, I'm not going to read that out. Typically I do, but I hope you can read it and understand the spirit of it. So what's up? Astrologically speaking, of course. Now, when it came to this particular situation we're in, I started looking at the astrological indicators all the way back in November. And, at that point, I did not think that we're going to have something called the coronavirus that's actually going to bring the entire world to a lockdown. That was furthest from my thought. What I used to think at that point is that there's going to be some terroristic type event, because this is how we're programmed. I thought we're going to have something so disastrous. And especially I was looking at Christmas and Christmas Eve of last year. And I thought there was something going to be so deadly that it's going to be in the news. And I stayed home. I just watched the news. Nothing happened. So I said, oh, there I go, wrong again. Because when we make these predictions as astrologers, it's not that we tend to be 100% correct. I mean, my teacher told me that if we're really good, it's about 70% average of getting the highest accuracy. Typically, it's about 50 to 60% of accuracy. So then I said, well, that's surprising, nothing happened, because the astrological indicators were so strong that I was so sure it was going to show up. But I stayed quiet. I didn't take the plunge and went out and make a bold statement, and I'm glad I didn't do that. Then I said, well, it didn't happen in Christmas, nothing in Christmas Eve. Definitely it's going to show up on New Year's Eve. And again, New Year's Eve, nothing. Very quiet. Everyone had a pleasant New Year's, and I'm glad for that. And so I went on. However, I would meet a number of my students or talk with them or chat with them. And in January, I kind of confided into them because, it was safe to do so without being condemned. And I did indicate to them in January that there was something that's going to be so crazy. It's going to be similar to September 11th, 2001. As you recall, crashed into the World Trade Center. And from that day onwards, the US society has changed. In fact, the entire world has changed, because today we do not board a plane without going through those ridiculous safety checks. They're annoying. They make flying so not fun anymore. And so the world has changed. And in January, I told someone that it's going to be so crazy. I didn't know what that was. In fact, I did put out something on, I think it was January 24th, that there was going to be a virus attack, a biochemical warfare attack in LA. And what actually happened, I knew it was not going to be via a plane, and I thought it was going to be through a drone. So those are the conclusions we make based on the indicators we get. What actually happened was there was a person who traveled from China, went to LA during that date. I think he spent a little time in LA and then flew to Seattle, and that's where Corona came into the US. Now, I do focus a lot in the US because I'm based in the US typically, and so a lot of focus is within the US activities. Anyway, so one of my friends reminded me on WhatsApp with this, and later on another friend, I was in Warsaw, Poland doing a filming project, and I talked to my crew at that point, and I said there was something dramatic also on 23rd, 24th in March, which is the day that India went on a lockdown. But then Corona became a way of life, and on April 4th, I made the following predictions based on astrology, of course. April 8th, I said beginning of hope, because everybody was asking, as you are now, when will it end? When is this going to end? When are we going to go back to our lives? And I also said some leaders will take credit. Easter, I thought lockdowns will be relaxed. Well, there was talk about it, and some countries did manage to do that, but not a whole lot. April 22nd, that the reign of terror will begin to diminish, but will dominate the news until 2023. I also stated on April 4th in one of these Zoom talks, June to September, the coronavirus will come back. And that's where we are today. But this April 8th is an interesting one, because on April 8th is when the lockdown was relaxed in Wuhan. And for the first time, people were allowed to move around. And this was April 8th again. I did indicate that some leaders will take credit. What I had in mind actually was our dear Trump, our favorite guy, and he did say on April 8th, I think we all did a very good job. Anyway, just throw that in because it's kind of amusing to see that come true. Okay, Easter, nothing happened, or there was some talk, but what is more significant actually is on April 22nd, the highest declines of positive cases worldwide, countries cautiously relaxing COVID-19 restrictions. 18 US states showed decline in positive cases. Over half of US states take steps to open economy. 50% cases down in New York, and so on. I mean, there's a lot more. And this, I just focused on the US because a lot of the time when I was doing this particular study was, or this talk was catered towards the US. Today I'm focusing more on UK because most of you are based in UK. So let's look at this 22nd. So if you look at this daily deaths, this is, by the way, a statistic, a worldwide statistic. We found nothing happening here, but then it peaked up in April to the 19th, and it started declining all the way. And as I had mentioned, it increased in August, September, from June onwards, June, July onwards. We see that the total cases of serious and critical cases was exactly in line with the astrological predictions of April being the peak and then declining on April 22nd and so on. An increase in June, July. We see a decrease there and then a gradual increase in June till September. These charts are basically 2 weeks old. And this is these charts reveal or validate the predictions that I've made on 4th of April. Now, in the UK, in the US, the same thing happened. Look at these dates. In April, there was an increase of critical new cases and a decrease around May, June, and a steep increase in June, July, August, and so on. So, given that we have this, how have we been dealing with it? It's one thing to predict. The other issue is, how are we in the modern era, where we consider ourselves to be the greatest, most advanced, technologically, medically speaking, and how are we dealing with this? And what we have is in the West, particularly, or even worldwide, we have been focusing on masks, washing hands, observing social distancing. This is kind of interesting, but is it really the solution? I mean, there's been a lot of debate, hate attacks, atrocities fueled by the media. I mean, we spend so much time and energy arguing about these things, but are they really effective? Let's look at some more charts. I usually don't do charts, but here in this case, okay. So you find the red lines are where masks were not obligatory. US, Germany, and UK, while in China, we see it leveling off, in South Korea leveling off, and other countries were kind of doing better. Here's a better chart, which shows countries that did not insist on masks, while the others that did have masks. So you see some statistical validation that masks are useful. In my view, they may not be preventive, they may not really be protective, but they are certainly serve as an effective deterrent. Now, the question then becomes, when we look at these approaches that we've been using in the West, does it apply worldwide? Now, because of my background in Ayurveda and astrology and the Vedas, I have a big interest in understanding how does these principles work in a different situation and different circumstances. So I always compare what we do in the West with what we do in India because of my background in Ayurveda also. So you'll see again, 2 weeks old statistics. US, the rate is about 0.0054% in terms of deaths, total deaths. India, on the other hand, if you compare the percentage based on the population, it's 0.0004%. Okay, it's increased since the last 2 weeks. But the idea of wearing masks or social distancing, is it valid in a different situation? In India, the idea of making masks, to provide masks, the logistical and the financial costs to produce masks and serve the entire population of 1.3 billion at a rate of average, I think it's 50 cents now. I was going to convert it to pounds, but I got lazy and I said, well, I just use the same thing. But it amounts to $2.1 billion per week. I mean, what kind of money is that? And how can they actually use that? Why would they use that much amount of money to just produce masks when they could actually use the money for development? So the idea of masks in India does not work. What about social distancing? It's a great idea. It's effective, a good deterrent. And we have a recommendation of about 2 meters or 6 feet. And it works. I'm in Scandinavia and in Sweden and Norway. Basically, social distancing is a way of life here. So it doesn't mean that people are actually doing anything extra to social distance themselves. And things are so normal in Norway and even in Sweden. People still go to shops and grocery stores and restaurants, but they still maintain the same distance that they used to maintain before the coronavirus came. But how do you expect social distancing in a place like India with 1.3 billion people around in a small square footage? And the idea of social distancing in India with 2 meters apart, I mean, Indians would spread out all the way to South Africa and the North Pole if they had to do that. So obviously that didn't work. So we're looking at the masks, social distancing. And what about pandemics over time? Throughout history, we've seen a lot of deadly situations in different places, but you do not see the highlight in India as much, which is also another interesting point. If we look at history, all the way from 165 years AD, after Christ, we find that there was these plagues that came on until the 18th century, but mostly these affected Europe and probably Americas, some in Asia, but you don't hear a lot of these incidences in the Indian subcontinent. Now I'm also including Pakistan and Bangladesh because it was one country at that point. So you find maybe there's a lot of reasons you could say that maybe the statistics weren't there, or we could give so many different reasons. But when you see the number of deaths, obviously people can record that because it's hard. It's really hard to hide that fact. And you'll see throughout history that these plagues affected a lot of places: East Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America. Of course, there were some incidences in India and Pakistan, Bangladesh areas, the Indian subcontinent, but not as much. Now, in the modern day, we see the same thing, a lot of it in Asia, Ebola, Zika in South America, Ebola in Africa, COVID worldwide, and some of these in different continents. again, history repeats itself. And what do we learn from it? What we're going through right now in the US is exactly what happened in 1918. Spread by contact, avoid crowds, if possible, walk to work, do not spit on floor, and so on. Wearing masks for the same flu that we experience today. Okay? But the point I'm trying to make here with what I presented is that we are driving ourselves crazy with all of these input that we get from the media, fake news, and all the statistics that's being provided, when we are missing a larger picture. And to top off the pandemic that we're dealing with, there is also Plandemic. I don't know whether you guys have seen this movie. It's a documentary. You won't find it on YouTube, but you can actually Google Plandemic, and it's an interestingly very well done pandemic. But you know, whether it's pandemic or plandemic, it does not matter for what I'm about to say. What can we do? And how can we do this? Basically, the focus, structure, and discipline has to be with living healthy, eating healthy, meditation, and exercise. Why is this so? I'll give you a historical background. This approach basically is a comprehensive approach to boosting one's immunity. I mean, the point here is what do we do to boost our immunity? And when we talk about medical advice, what typically happens is that we talk to specialists, and these specialists will tell us what they know. If you talk to an herbalist, they'll tell you what herbs to consume. If you talk to a nutritionist, they'll load you up with supplements. Physicians will give you a lot of drugs with a lot of side effects. If you talk to a yoga person, because we're talking about a yoga group here, they'll give you a lot of yoga exercises, and so on and so on. But there is a comprehensive approach, and this approach was actually stated in Ayurveda. Now, for those of you who do not know what Ayurveda is, it is an ancient science developed in India in the ancient times, anywhere from 6,000 years before Christ. And this study, this field of knowledge, actually did provide information, advice, and knowledge on how to deal with pandemics. This whole science is based on coexisting harmony with nature, meaning that humans live harmoniously with nature. And that's what Ayurveda really is. A lot of people think Ayurveda is Indian medicine or Indian natural medicine. It is far, far, far more involved than that. But what does Ayurveda reveal is that the harmonious and balanced ways to dynamically integrate our body and mind, spirit in a given environment and climate. What works in India does not work in Norway, for instance, in Scandinavia, or in the Sahara Desert, or in the Middle East. The whole idea is balance. Now, there was this guy, Charaka Samhita. For those who might not know, he was a great teacher. It's a compilation, actually, of Ayurvedic based knowledge that was compiled thousands of years ago, but it was documented about 2,200 years ago in 8,400 medical verses. These are verses that were compiled in the Charaka Samhita. Now, in this, we're talking about 2,200 years ago, in this, they described the epidemics. There was a great Ayurvedic guru at that point, which is actually documented in this text. His name was Atreya, and as you know, in the Vedic tradition, the teaching was basically done through dialogues. It's an oral tradition. So Atreya was talking to his student called Agnivesha. And in this dialogue, he describes pandemics and epidemics. What are they? Where do they come from? How do they occur? And on top of it, of course, how to prevent and cure them. In this document, he explains, Atreya, the teacher, explains the causes of it. And interestingly, the causes that he gives are some of the things that we are experiencing today. He stated, to start on, that the causes are basically abnormal conditions in nature, to start out with. Now, you can say that, oh, well, this does not apply because COVID was designed as a biowarfare and it was a pandemic. Okay, fine. We can see that even astrologically. But he pointed out that one of the key factors, and number one, he stated it as number one, was that there are astrological influences in the cause of pandemics or epidemics. And we just demonstrated that a few minutes ago. The second factor he pointed out was that there are natural elements that are out of balance. We see that today. Floods, fires. I mean, the fires in California and the West Coast is really out of control. We see that the rhythms of these, let's say, the water rhythms and the wind rhythms have changed. The water has become polluted. Air has become polluted. So these natural elements, because of the pollution, are out of balance. So we're talking about the entire environment. This was actually demonstrated by the recovery. The moment the entire world went into a lockdown, rivers started breathing, nature started regenerating itself, and so on. We see so much of that evidence the moment humans stopped traveling. We know today seasons are out of control. The out of seasons in my context, but basically what Atreya pointed out to his teaching, he says that the seasons essentially come sooner than expected or come later, and the seasons are either too hot or too cold, but we get totally misaligned. The seasons are totally misaligned from what we typically relied on in order to grow food and live our lives. Furthermore, he did state this, that the herbs that we produce will lose its effectiveness. It will lose its nutritional value. So for instance, now, when we talk about having vegetarian food, we find that just eating vegetarian food by itself does not give us the nutrients we want because, again, the foods have lost its nutritional value. He also stated that land becomes toxic. Now, and we see that with the environmental disasters that's going on, crops will fail. We see birds and bees and animals just kind of suddenly dying, without anything really happening. He also stated pests will overcome and overrun crops. So basically, it's like we don't have food. We can't drink the water. We can't breathe the air. And all of this affects humanity. Now, we get to a point then when everybody's affected, we get into a survival mode. When we get into a survival mode, what happens is that we become more defensive and we become more selfish. And when somebody tries to take over or step in boundaries, we become violent because we need to protect what we have. So we see this, I mean, when I'm in Scandinavia, I don't see a whole lot of this, but in the news, we see a lot of these happening in the US. There's a lot of stuff happening elsewhere too that may not be reported. So then his student, Agnivesha, asks, if this is so, how does it happen? Why does it happen? And according to Ayurveda, Atreya says that it's a disturbance of Vata. Now, this is a bit technical. Kind of threw it there for those of you who are into Ayurveda would know that. It's a disturbance of the air element, which also includes the spiritual element. And he suggested restoring the body, which is critical. Now, and restoring virtues, because virtues, in fact, have a significant effect on how we deal with the virus. But this is a huge topic in itself. But basically, in a nutshell, what he pointed out was that what we can do individually is focus on building our immunity. When we talk about restoring, we talk about detoxification, doing panchakarma and things like that. And again, many people might not know what that is, but basically you try to detoxify your body and build your immunity. This is the big focus, and this is what I'll be focusing on today. Here, in terms of restoring virtues, we're talking about restoring Dharma, but really all that means is having a sattvic mind, having a sattvic nature, so that we do not get disturbed by all the things that are happening there. Like, for instance, I've been recommending that a great deal is turn off the news, because a lot of the news is so negative, it disturbs who you are, and you don't get peace. How do you live? Makes a big difference. And Atreya, the teacher, explained that when leaders of nations, religious leaders, of communities, when they transgress virtues and ignore the needs of society on different levels, this is when these pandemics come up. It's a response of nature to deal with what's going on. We have seen this throughout history. I mean, in the Bible, we have the Noah situation with the floods and so on. In almost every tradition, we see the effects of weather, elements affecting us to the extent where we need to respond. We need to sort of ask, why is this happening? And change our behavior after realizing that we have no control over those elements. But if the focus is on restoring the body and restoring virtues, this is something we do have control over. And there is a reason why. Now, when we talk about the masks, social distancing and things, they're effective as a deterrent, but it doesn't really help us to deal with the virus. And this is where Charaka Samhita, through Aitreya, explains it very well. Ayurveda really is that it is based on the principle that the human body has the intelligence to produce the necessary pharmacological needs to heal itself. Yeah. So, therefore, the key to optimum health is to enable your body to do what it knows best to do. And this is actually the biggest focus of this talk. We focusing on the masks, focusing on the social distancing, focusing on the fake news and the media is actually disturbing us or making us worse. We're going crazy, we're building anxiety, we're losing our sense of calmness. But what can you do? You have that choice, you also have that control. And this is what Atreya talked about. This is what's recommended in Ayurveda, in Charaka Samhita. Okay? So, what you can do is focus on building your immunity. Now, there are many ways. I mean, Google is riddled with the suggestions on how you can build your immunity, and I'm sure many of you have tried that. But based on Ayurveda, these are some of the recommendations. I mean, if you have a chance, you can take a photograph of that so that it will help you plan your day. Warm water when you wake up. This is so powerful. Yoga. Now, a lot of people think yoga is just these exercises, but basically, there's a direct link to sun salutations, the vitality of our body, the health of our body to the sun. There's a direct link, and we don't know that. But doing sun salutations in the morning, 10 minutes or 5 minutes, is just enough to get these two going. Pranayama, increasing oxygen. Now, pranayama, there are some people that have had COVID, and when they go to the doctor encourages them to do exercise to increase the oxygen intake. Well, we do that already in pranayama. So you wake up in the morning, you drink a glass of water, do your yoga, 3 to 12 sets, which takes about 5 to 15 minutes, and sit and breathe for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes. So just a simple breathing will help you do that. Gut health, incredibly important to build immunity. We all know that. Turmeric. Turmeric is a spice that an Indian cannot live with. I mean, in all the curries, everything we do, we got to have turmeric in it. But here's the problem. In the West, we sprinkle it on our meals, which does not work. Turmeric needs to be cooked, at least for a minute or two. So you put it in food, it gets cooked with the food, and turmeric is incredibly useful for keeping viruses away. We're talking about any virus. Garlic in small amounts, not a lot, but garlic is also useful. Again, other suggestions outside Ayurveda. Reduce stress and meditation. We know that nature walks, tender loving care. Reducing stress is significant to boost your immunity. Exercise. If you don't do exercise, you're not enabling your body to heal itself. It is critically important to exercise somehow. I'm not saying you should exercise for an hour, but 10 minutes a day is plenty. You can do more, of course, but there are a lot of studies, again, that show exercise is critical for building immunity. Consume foods with no preservatives. Now, you all know that, but it is important to mention. You can take supplements A, B, C, and D. There's a lot of studies coming out right now in the recent months that vitamin D and zinc are critical. But of course, you can take multiple. All of these are little enablers to the core thing. The main thing is actually doing these things, then using these things to support it. Of course, again, those of you who are into extracts and oil therapy, Bach therapy, homeopathy, all of these really work. Stay hydrated, avoid sugar, because sugar actually is critical in reducing your immunity, and it messes up with your gut and digestive. So with zinc, basically you can take about 30 to 50 milligrams. Most of these others, you can take more than 200 milligrams. There's also elderberry extract, which is also very good for building your immunity. So you follow these two recommendations, stay calm, don't worry about what's happening. Make sure your family and you are doing this, because without having your loved ones participate in this, it becomes harder. But if you just focus on these things, it doesn't matter what pandemics or plandemics or epidemics come, you will be fine, okay? Boost your natural barrier, which fortifies your innate immunity, which prevents the manifestation of any disease. And this is something that Indians have been doing. When I say Indians, I'm including Pakistan and Bangladesh, in that subcontinent for the longest time, which is why you don't see significant amount of deaths recorded throughout history. And that was the reason why I put out those graphs earlier. Okay, because of this fundamental key to dealing with health. Again, the body has the intelligence. You do not have the intelligence to, for instance, make your kidney grow. You do not have the intelligence to make your body parts grow less or more. I mean, if we had that intelligence, we would all look young, because we'd stop ourselves from aging, of course. Okay. Western medicine does not know this. Okay. What we need to do is just enable our body, and the body will do the rest. So you'll find this in Asian cooking: garlic, onion, ginseng root, pepper, green onion. All of these are the original flu shot. You know, this is what helps us. Now, the other problem is that we do, when we get sick, we want a quick remedy. We want a vaccine. And we're really we're giving up our responsibility, and we're handing it over to some authority. Vaccines are not going to help because they're not really curing your body. In fact, it might even make you worse. There was a time when I used to travel in the 90s, and every time before I traveled, I was forced to take cholera vaccine. So I took cholera vaccine for years. Later on, they say, oh, it doesn't have any effect. I've seen this with many different vaccines. I mean, I think polio vaccine is effective, but for the most part, focusing on getting vaccine is not the solution. The solution is build your immunity where you are, and you'll be fine. So then the real question is, when is this all going to be over? Because we started there, I'm going to end with this. We are in September, and astrologically speaking, this whole increase of COVID ends next week. Okay, so that's the good news. But we're not going to see the effect until next month. Just like I had stated earlier, the COVID spread sort of stalled in April. But in terms of experiencing it in our daily lives, we did not get a release until May, okay? Because the governments have to look at the statistics, then they have to kind of decide when to do this, when to let go with when to reduce the lockdowns or when to impose lockdowns and things like that. So after that is when we see the results. October, we'll see reducing incidences, but the situation we're in now will continue. However, because of the reducing incidences worldwide, in November, December, I'm looking at relaxed lockdowns, more mobility. I think people will be able to move around more so in November and December. When it comes to December, we'll have a more or less a new normal of Christmas and New Year's, but it won't be as we experienced in the past. However, it will still dominate the news for the next 2 years, astrologically speaking again. But then we go into 2021 and 22 in the new normal. There is also a potential of another pandemic, which I've mentioned before, next year. However, that is so different than this one. This one, in terms of corona, it was mostly the main problem with COVID-19 was that we were not aware that we're spreading the virus because we remained asymptomatic for 2 weeks. You know, the next pandemic that might come up might not be as impactful as COVID-19, but it will still reinforce our fear of getting another virus and so on. So if you see in the past few years, we had a lot of viruses. We didn't really make a big deal about it. There was Zika more recently, there was Ebola, the avian flu, MERS, and we continued with our lives. So it's going to continue that way. And you see these, by the way, when these viruses occurred, we could see that astrologically too. With that, I think I'm ready for questions, and the questions will probably help our interaction more, because also just talking and talking might bore you guys to death. So with that, I end my presentation and open for questions. I think there are some questions in the chat. Let me stop sharing here. Now, I would recommend you to write your questions, because that way it will save time. And after I'm done with the written questions on chat, I'm open to verbal questions online. Okay, so the first question is there's a lot of gratitude and thanks and donation links. So Kanan Desai asks, is powdered turmeric okay? Yes, powdered turmeric is fine as long as you cook it. The idea of sprinkling turmeric is a modern concept that that doesn't really work, because the heat has to break down the turmeric in order for it to be effective. Or does it have to be raw turmeric which is grated into food? Now, if you have raw turmeric, that's better. Because what's happening is that sometimes it depends who manufactures it. If you know where it's produced reliably, then it's fine. Typically, what happens is sometimes, in order to cut cost, they'll have raw turmeric and then they'll mix it with white flour, so you don't know whether you're having 100% turmeric. But basically, if you can buy and afford raw turmeric and it's available in your neighborhood, then it's fine. But that's not easy to come by. So just don't worry too much about it. Get turmeric. The key thing is it's got to be cooked. Now, one of the things I do recommend is you take a sort of like a handful of turmeric powder and mix it with a little water. So you make a paste out of it. You cook that for 2 minutes, and then you store it in a container in a refrigerator. So whenever you need it, you can then take it and mix it with your milk. It doesn't have to be cooked after it's been cooked once. So you can still cook it once with water and then put it into, store it in your refrigerator, and then just take a spoonful or a teaspoon whenever you need to. Okay.
So, Swamiji, I've heard that with turmeric, its effect can be amplified with the addition of a little bit of black pepper. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, because you see, again, when I say that turmeric has to be cooked, when you're cooking it, you're putting the heat element, the Agni. So for instance, the turmeric can be aided with the black pepper, which gives it a lot of Agni, and Agni means fire, and also ginger. And sometimes you want to carry that with honey also in certain cases. So sometimes we'll make, like for instance, the golden milk concept, where you have turmeric with milk and honey. That is also a brilliant combination. But yes, if you don't have any pitta problems, meaning if you can sleep well, because some people can't sleep well, and when you put in black pepper, it kind of makes it difficult for you to sleep, which you need to sleep. So sometimes adding black pepper can not be so useful, but it's good if you can. Thank you for asking that. Harriet asks, I bought some turmeric tea bags that contain turmeric root. Are these effective for cooking with? Yeah, the tea bags, you got to make sure whether they are real turmeric roots. If they are, then it's fun. It's okay to cook it. As long as you're cooking it, it's fine. Venkata asks, pronouns, many astrologers predicting that the new avatar will be born in India, as there were 6 planets that came into the houses on September. Well, you know, the whole issue about avatars. Let me put that to you. There's avatars all the time in every time we have. The problem is we don't know they exist. They're great avatars, even presently today. But we don't know that they exist, because they might be carpenters, they might be farmers, they might be, you know, they're just doing their thing. You only find them if you have tremendous luck, tremendous punya. You might come across someone and they look so ordinary. They're not known publicly, and that's the beauty of it, because if they are known publicly, you would not access them, or the real people that need to access them cannot access them. So these planets that were there recently in September, one of the things when the planets are so exaggerated, I'm speaking astrologically speaking again, is that their egos get really exaggerated. So I'm not sure whether that really helps with the avatar concept, but yeah, maybe, you know, maybe it might happen. We shall see. From C. Michaels, great to have sound practical advice. Kadambari with things. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. Maggie asks, what about our leaders? Do we sit back and let things unfold? Okay, so this is an issue. I don't know whether, Maggie, you're in the US. This is an issue that Americans seriously have with what's going on with the politics. Listen, In 2017, there was a big thing about Trump being impeached. And I gave a talk on January 1st at the ashram there. And I said, listen, guys, do not make yourselves miserable with the news. Trump has his own karmas to deal with. That's why he's there. Okay. You need to focus on you, your body. You need to focus on your family, your loved ones, your job. That's it. You know, the world is going to move. They're going to do their things. You have no control over it. Unless you are an elected official, then do something about it. Unless you're directly involved in the politics of things, do something about it, because that's your responsibility. But if you're not a political leader or a religious leader, or you're not a leader in any shape, way, or form, mind your own business. Atreya, when he pointed out in those slides, he did not say where, he did not advise people to social distance themselves. He did not advise them to wear masks. He went down to the core. Because if you know the root of the problem, which he did state, astrological factor is one of them that indicates something is happening, what he suggested was straight to the core. Stop wasting your time. Stop making yourself miserable. Stop listening to the news that drives you crazy. And focus on what is important. What is important is take care of your health, exercise. Instead of listening to the news, take those 10 minutes and go walk around. Even walking around for 10 minutes is useful. Turn off the damn TV, turn off your smartphones. Go walk around and get some fresh air and exercise, and that will do you a lot more good than sitting around and complaining about what leaders are doing. It's their karma. 4 years ago, I predicted Trump was going to win. I'm predicting he's not going to win this time. I could be wrong. But the last 5 US presidents, I could predict it. Now, here's the question you have to ask yourself. If someone like me, because I'm not any special, someone like me can predict, using these tools of astrology, that a president or someone is going to win the elections, or even a football match, by the way, we can do that. If we can determine that, what does that really mean? It means that these things, the results are ordained. They're preordained. We have no control over them. Do you have control over who's going to be the leader? No. The problem is there's a whole collective problem. There's a collective karmic problem. If it is in the US, the problem there is a collective karma of US citizens that brings a rise to that leader. If you looked at Hitler in Germany during that time, same thing. He rose because of the collective karma. And that collective karma leads to a situation where we have to deal with it. What did COVID-19 have? How did COVID-19 impact the world? We could predict it astrologically. So what does that mean? You can say that it was a pandemic. You can say that it was a biowarfare. Fine. But that was a result of something that was meant to happen. The reason why I put those statistics in the beginning was to demonstrate the credibility of astrology. That if astrology can predict, that means anyone who studies astrology can do the same, then how does that really influence the entire world? Things are going to happen. There's an earthquake, there's a volcano, there's a fire. We can't drive ourselves crazy. What is your civics? You do what is your duty. You do your civic duty, which is go vote. You don't like someone, go vote. When? During election time. In between, mind your own business. That's my little monologue about that question, okay, about our leaders. You sit back and let things unfold because there's not a whole lot you can do. Your responsibility is elections, voting. If you're so driven to actually be involved in politics, then please do that. And when you're in power, try to change things. Natalie and Elzud, I think, so the election, since this is a yoga talk and Corona talk, I don't want to get too much into the US elections, which I did actually a few weeks ago. And I'm going to do the same thing on October 24th. I'm going to talk about specifically the US elections and the drama that unfolds, I'll predict who's going to be the winner again, because the fact that I predicted earlier in September who the winner is going to be for the US elections, things can change because there's influence of multiple other factors. But by the time I come to 24th of October, I'll know for sure. And the economic situation in the US and the rest of the world, I also predicted that it's not good this month. As we saw, I predicted that the stock markets will go down this month, and they have been going down, but it will get better next month. Yes, golden milk is amazing. What is an avatar? Avatar is basically, it's an Indian word that kind of describes something like the appearance of Jesus or some great noble being like Krishna. Or you have, even for the Muslims, like Muhammad, some great leaders that come and change and transform the world. What do you think about turmeric supplements? Again, supplements are useless. I know a lot of people consuming supplements. I mean, they might have some effect, but if it's uncooked, it doesn't do anything. It just passes through them. So I do not recommend turmeric supplements. And thank you, S. Tubin, for asking that. That's a very important question. Tim has suggested that you can write to your MP. Yes, that's your civic duty, to write to an MP. Please do that and vote. Otherwise, don't really waste time with politics. It's just crazy what's happening. I used to be quite involved in politics in my day, and I stepped out of it because I saw there was so much Dharma, so much everyone has compromised their virtues, and so I decided that's not where I want to belong. And so, yeah, I ended up becoming a Swami, is what happened. Okay, those are the end of questions. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, I know we're closing up on time, but I'm not sure what Ramji wants to extend a bit with more questions, or
we're able to go on if there's people asking questions. These talks have been anywhere between an hour to a maximum hour and a half, so we're in the right time frame.
Okay, great. So then what I'd recommend is just unmute yourself. Don't forget to do that. And go ahead and ask your question. You might want to state your name and where you're speaking from, and proceed with your question.
Well, this is your opportunity. Somebody's sitting in front of you saying, ask them the question that you always wanted to ask, and you've got the opportunity.
Oh, I've got a question.
Okay.
Is it possible to say something about which particular planets you saw influencing COVID and the impacts that you've described?
So, do you know Indian astrology or the nakshatras by any chance?
Oh, no, I'm much more familiar with Western astrology.
Okay, so there's something called the North Node, which actually transited in a nakshatra called Adra, and there's quite a few astrologers in the group here, so they know about this. In fact, they're aware. You can see this in Western astrology, but it's basically the North Node effect, going through a particular range of stars that kind of indicated the virus effect. But you have to look at, you cannot look at one, in astrology, at least the way I've been practicing it, is you cannot look at one particular planet or one particular trigger. You have to look at all planets. So when we're dealing with astrology, it's like looking at a painting. And if you look at the color black, for instance, if you look at my background and if you look at the color black, you're totally going to miss me because except my hair maybe and the beard. But so in order to get a full picture, you have to look at the entire picture and how does these different planets, because all of them are really involved, and how they are all playing part of it. So in this, for instance, based on what happened earlier, for instance, the North Node moved away from this particular set of stars, but then, however, the retrograde Saturn and Jupiter brought back the influence of the virus for the time period from June to September. And both of these planets are moving on as of next week. So one has moved on. So you have to look at the composite picture in order to be able to make certain predictions. Yeah, it's quite entailed actually. I spent hours and hours and hours looking at it, and I still miss some of the factors because it's you have to kind of look at it from multiple angles.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Swamiji, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Swamiji, Hari Om, Pranam Swamiji. We're still going to Rahu, still in Gandanta. I just moved the sign from Mithuna to Vrishabha. Right. So still this effect will persist like you mentioned?
No, things are clearing out, but the problem is, for instance, if you looked at the previous prediction I'd made, which is things were going to end in April, and sometimes when I say something, I forget to convey the fact that there is the astrological factor which shows the increase of the virus, which ended in April, but then this was brought in, it was dragged in by other planets, and this ends next week. But the question is, then are we going to feel the impact of it? And we're not going to feel the impact, like the lockdowns are going to continue for this coming month because it takes time. There's a lag time between the natural events of the zodiac and when we react. So then the leaders have to get their datas done and statistics, and they have to listen to like gazillion experts, and they all get confused, and finally somebody has to make a decision, and then they get blamed at, and by the time all that occurs, we as human people on the low totem pole will then be told, oh yes, now you can take your flight, how you can eat your food or something like that.
Thank you.
Yvette is asking on chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Swami, this is
yes, go ahead, from
Singapore.
Hong Kong. Are you in Hong Kong? No, you're in Singapore.
Yes, I'm in Singapore. It's the first time I heard you talking about the teachings of Atriya and all that, and because in our fellows class we don't hear from you. So this evening I found something that is really interesting. What you show us just now and discuss, it aligns with our Tao teaching, the teachings of Taoism, which we always say there should be a balance of the yin and the yang, and also the balance of nature and the human beings that are staying on Mother Earth, and also the practice of virtues in our daily life, which is not something that is considered a package that we should do when we talk about staying healthy. So just now you did explain how virtues come to be enforced if we practice it in our daily life, and that we can find inner peace. So this is something that I think very useful, especially because our concept comes from the Eastern, from China, and we find that if you have a balance of your thoughts, you will definitely have a balance in your body as well as the balance to the community. So I'm so pleased that I heard this from you, and I think it's really useful now. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So one of the things I do, which is where I know Tan from, is I do these interreligious dialogue, and and I sort of keep my life compartmentalized. The things that I talked about today, I never share there.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So, but just to validate Ten's point, it's of course the Ayurveda has a concrete, very systematized, structured way of explaining things in a concrete way. But India does not is not the only country that does this. Now, one of the things that actually in another group that I talk about, if you look at all ancient civilizations, they all had something similar. I mean, I could talk about the Shinto in Japan. I talk about the Bushmen in Africa. We call them primitive, but they live according to nature. They live in balance with nature.
Yes.
The Native Americans, if you look at the Hopi and the Lakotas, and even down to South America, if you look at the Mayans, the Incas, they all lived in harmony with nature. The Aborigines still today live in nature, live in balance with nature. In North Scandinavia, the Sama culture. So I did a study of all these ancient civilizations, and I realized that they have a lot more in common than what we have today in modern day. In fact, I would still venture out to say that we, in the last 100 years, this last century, with the advent of industrialization, we have done more harm to the environment than in the past centuries. And this is where COVID comes up to adjust. It's Mother Earth saying, guys, stop it. You are making me sick, and we're going to stitch. So if we don't change our ways, and we just focus on social distancing and masks, we are really not solving the problem. The problem starts with you starting with yourself.
Right.
You are this drop in the water. You filter your thoughts, you filter your behavior, you change your lifestyle, and you change your family, those next to you. Then the rest will fall through, because at the end of the day, you'll find that your neighbor might be sick and you're not. And that is the focus. Thank you for bringing me.
Thank you.
Swamiji?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So I have a basic question. This is Rahul.
Yes.
I wonder as to how does the celestial bodies, planets, stars, nakshatras, so far away, influence events on Earth and even on individuals' lives?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And it's a question that's been asked throughout centuries, frankly. If you read the Aristotle metaphysics, both Aristotle and Socrates, that was one of the big discussions way back when. We're talking about 360 BCE, where Socrates would ask, how is it that those stupid planets we don't see affect me, little measly person on this earth? And how does it affect me differently from another person? Or even twins, okay? So the short answer, that's a great philosophical question, which we don't have time for. But the short answer is that we're all one, okay? We're all one entity. Just like when you look at your physical body, you cannot say that your right hand is separate from your left hand. Your right toe is different from your finger. Your nose is different. Yes, they're different parts of the same body. But if I take a hammer and hit your toe, you'll feel the pain throughout your body. So that's exactly. So the thing is that this universe is connected. And by the way, as Tan pointed out, the entire world is one world. Mother Earth, we think of it as inert. It actually is alive. Okay, and it's responding because of what we are doing to it. And it will continue to respond because of what we're doing it. That's why virtue becomes important. If we don't change our ways, our own behavior, forget about what the leaders are doing and forget about what your neighbors are doing and even forget about what your loved ones are doing. You are the one that needs to change. And by you changing, everyone around you changes. I mean, this happens with a lot of my students. I mean, many of my students actually are here today. I'm happy to see you all. And they know that. They have experienced that with me. So what happens is that we do horrible things that creates a negative vibration. That vibration affects the entire universe of vibration, and that reflects on us. What astrology does is that it allows for certain things to happen. So, for instance, it's the weather. I look at astrology not as a definitive fatalistic event that happens. All it does is an opportunity of certain things to manifest. Okay, just like when harvest time comes in, I don't say you're going to get a harvest. If you didn't do anything, you're not going to get a harvest. Okay? You have to do at the right time, plant the right seeds, farm, and do what needs to be done the entire summer so that you can get a great harvest. But if springtime comes and you don't do anything, you party, and then you say, oh, well, you know, and then at harvest, you're saying, oh, well, where's my harvest? Well, you know, there's some effort that you need to put in. So astrology works that way. Astrology are just indicators of energy that allows for certain things to happen and manifest. Okay, and it depends on your karma. It depends on your virtues. So you do wrong things, of course they're going to manifest later. If I harm somebody, that harm will come back to me, and this is what we're experiencing. It comes to me in terms of fire. It comes into me as elements of disasters. It comes to me via diseases also. So they're very different ways and means that these energies come back. But the bottom line is, because we're one energy, every ripple of movement affects each one of us. There's no doubt about it.
I just have a short follow-up. Is then Jyotishi, is it consistent with Advaita, which actually sees Maya as unreal? So is it consistent?
You have to look at the context. Okay, so yes, very much so. It's part of the Vedas. So Jyotish is one of the limbs of the Vedas, and everything in the Vedas, Jyotish, Ayurveda, Vastu, all of these are limbs of the Vedas. And in the end, Vedanta, which is the end of the Vedas, actually all of the Vedas are consistent. You have to see what context in order to appreciate the difference. So the context is missing. You can say and in fact, a lot of the statements in the Vedas are contradictory and even negate each other. But what makes sense is you have to look at the context in order to see that they are all connected, and the entire Vedas make sense. Jyotish, Ayurveda, Vastu, all of this makes sense based on Vedanta. In fact, my understanding of Jyotish really improved because of Vedanta. Otherwise, I was still stuck with some issues. Yeah.
The reason I ask is that because Advaita considers the world as Maya and illusion.
You have to understand
the prediction,
what that is. So that's the main point.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry we're digressing into these little topics because I don't want to lose people off, but yeah, these are good questions. We have a mixed crowd. Okay, so I think we can take one last question for those introverts who need some time to muster up some energy to ask a question, or courage rather. Feel free to ask, and otherwise we'll just bring it to a closure if there are no more questions. I'm happy to stay around.
Surely all of us in the UK, we can muster up some really tricky questions for Swamiji at this time. Come on, think of what we might be able to put him on the spot on something like this.
There is one question written there that, how about the business? I can understand the stock market.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry I missed Yvette's question. There's more to economics than the stock market. What about the broader picture of many businesses closing? Yes, and that is why we're going to see. So when I talk about the stock market, it's just an economic indicator. But because of what happened in March and April, what we're going to see is that the economy will actually have a major blow worldwide, not just in the US, in the next few months. And we're going to see the impact of that more so in the next year or so, because there's the lag time. The next question she's asking, is there any information about what the collective karma at the root of COVID? The collective karma has been the last 100 years what we've been doing to the earth. If you look at all the time if you go back and look at the leaders of our world from the First World War, actually even before that, 1895 onwards, you'll see that there's a lot of things that world leaders have done which created a huge impact in the place where we are today. In the US particularly, the 10 great, what we call the 10 great capitalists, if you go back and look at some of the research, for instance, the education system that was controlled by the 10 richest guys, they actually destroyed the education level of Americans, which is why we are where we are today. Medicine has gone from this natural immunity building abilities that worldwide cultures throughout civilizations have been practicing, and with the advent of modern medicine, because of these 10 capitalists, they're about 10, I'm not sure that they're 10, but they came out around that time at the turn of the century. They took away the power of healing from natural healers and put it into the context of modern medicine, where instead of using the things I suggested today, you need to pop a pill. You need to go and buy drugs. And my view, there's no real difference between pharmaceutical drugs and intoxicating drugs. And that's been a real problem. Now, one of the greatest things about modern medicine, actually, there are there's quite a bit of great achievements in medicine that I do not want to dismiss. But the dependency on pharmacy, the pharmacological prescriptions, is what I'm really against the prescriptions. But when you talk about surgery, for instance, or sort of like some of the research that's done in medicine, I think a lot of those is still very valid. I particularly like some of the surgeries that's done, some of the psychotherapy, physiotherapy work that's done. I also like the testings. We, of course, have different ways of testing, which is really non-intrusive in Ayurveda, and that's an amazing skill in itself. But for a lay person like us, we just need to make sure we eat the right things, take care of our bodies, make sure we maintain it. And this is, this is like Ten pointed out, this has been there throughout centuries. We just lost it the last 100 years. So when you look at all these other factors that's been playing out, is what led to the situation we're in. So you find Mother Earth is actually reacting. And because it's reacting, we cannot really depend on the things we used to depend on. And it's forcing us to think differently. It's forcing us to think outside the box. It's forcing us to re-examine everything, the reality that we see. And so when I present these things, I'm kind of giving you the nuts and bolts that you can actually take and go apply right away, right now, as soon as you're done. These are your takeaways that you can change your life with. And then just watch what happens around you. No, don't let it affect you, because you also need to keep your mind in place. By the way, I'll end with this, unless there's another question. Yoga is not about asana. Okay, yoga is about harmonizing or synchronizing your mind, body, and spirit. That's what yoga really is about. When you focus just on asana by itself, it actually is like having a table with 3 legs and you only focus with 1 leg. It doesn't stand. When you can bring your balance with your body, mind, sense complex, then you see that diseases won't affect you, your health is better, you're feeling better, your mental health is better. So all of these are really key, important factors to understand. Okay.
Thank you, Swamiji. And on that note, on that great note about the unity of yoga on everything and the way that it affects us so much, thanks from all of the group who's watching, and people will no doubt look at this video subsequently. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all of your support that you give us for the festival. It's really, really is welcome. And we look forward to seeing you again on a future occasion, and perhaps next summer, if you can make it to us, that'll be lovely to have you there and to have you in person. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you again on another one of those Sunday talks. So thank you, and bye-bye. Bye-bye.